Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Today we are going to make manicotti with a kind of a bechamel sauce. And we'll stuff it with kind of ricotta, mozzarella, parmesan, some peppers, and lots of deliciousness. And then we're gonna slice up some top sirloin steak, sear it up, and then saute some mushrooms, onions, and then make a delicious kind of cheesy garlic sourdough bread. So let's start by working on our bechamel sauce, which we're actually going to be making it a cheesy bechamel sauce. So it's technically a Mornay sauce, but our base is for our bechamel. So we're going to start by using 4 tablespoons of butter. And I'm going to start melting that off in my pan here. And then once it's nice and melted, we will get it, we'll add our flour in and start to make a roux for that. So as we start having it melt up here, we are going to drop our noodles in. That way they can kind of cool. I have my water nice and hot and boiling, and we're using our good manicotti noodles for this. And these don't take very long to cook. Let me grab some scissors. We're just going to cook them for about 5 or so minutes until they're just a little bit tender, but you still need them a little bit firm because they'll continue to cook up in the oven when we bake it. So we're going to drop our whole box of manicotti noodles in, and then I'm just going to add a little bit of salt as well. And then once it gets up to a kind of like a boil, quick boil again, then I'll kind of do my countdown for 5 minutes. Here we go. Okay, our butter is starting to melt up nicely here. Once it's completely melted, we'll add in our flour to make our roux, which is the base of our bechamel in here. So we'll let that. Don't heat your butter up too high or too fast because you don't want it to burn or go brown yet. While we're waiting for that, let's work on our base for our shells that we're going to stuff it up with. We're going to use 1 container of ricotta cheese. I like whole milk ricotta. It's a 15-ounce one. We're going to add it into our bowl here. So we're going to use the whole thing. And then I've got a lot of mozzarella bits that we're going through, but we're going to add in about 2 cups of mozzarella cheese in here as well. So we're going to use up some of these leftover bits of this first. I always find going through my cheese jar, and for some reason I always have so much mozzarella cheese. But we want about 2 cups in here. So far I've got about a cup in here. Open up another one. These do not want to open for me today. There we go. We'll give this a good little thing. So about 2 cups of our mozzarella. And then I've got some Parmesan that we are going to grate up in there. And I'm going to use my big grater size instead of when I normally do Parmesan. I like to do kind of that fine grated over the top. But for this, we're going to do big. And you just want about, a half a cup or so. Here we go. You can always do the finer grate on it or just get pre-grated, but I like the kind of the bigger one for it. A, it makes it go a lot faster, and B, you get like these good chunks of Parmesan cheese in there. So just a few more, and we should get pretty close to where we need to be. Okay. So we've got our cheeses in our bowl right now. Let's prep up some of the veggies that are going to go in here. let me give a good swirl on my butter here. It's almost all melted. And then we'll give a quick little toss on these because these got about 2 more minutes or so. Turn them down just a smidge so we don't get a boil over. We're going to add up some diced up red pepper in our red bell pepper in our manicotti. I'm going to dice it fairly fine so that you don't get really big chunks of it and so that it can get nice and kind of tender inside the manicotti. But I don't want it to be too, noticeable. But it will enough to add a nice kind of flavor that will work really well with the, the ricotta, mozzarella, and Parmesan filling, as well as the bechamel sauce. So pretty, nice and small. Let's see. Get this sliced up, and then we will add our flour in for our roux to make our bechamel. Here we go. I'll mince those in just a second. But my butter is nice and melted here. And again, I'm going to turn it down nice and low. And we are going to add in 4 tablespoons of flour. So you have equal parts butter and flour for this to make our roux. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to use my whisk, and we're just going to kind of combine the two, and we're going to let it heat up for about a minute or 2 in here to really develop the flavor. Now, we don't need to cook it so long that it starts to turn like an amber brown, which is what you use for a base of a gumbo. But for this, we do want that kind of richness to come out. Now, let me check on our noodles here. Feel like they've been in for about 5 minutes. They feel good. So I'm going to turn off my water, and I'm just going to use my tongs here. And we'll give a couple little things, and we're going to just take them out of here and let them just kind of cool off a little bit. Because it's much easier to stuff these guys when they're nice and cool versus when they're piping hot. Here we go. And it might not seem like you have a whole lot of pasta, but it is very filling. And because you're going to be stuffing them full, a lot of cheese, and it's a richness. So it is a very filling dish. Do I have a few more in here? I think I got one more swimming around. Okay. Let's take this guy off. Yep, got them all out. So we've got our manicotti noodles in here, and we're going to just let them kind of cool down just a little bit, and then we'll finish up making our base on here. So we've got our butter and our flour, which is our roux, kind of cooking up in here. Always don't rush it. Don't be quick to add in your milk because, again, you want it to have just this lovely kind of flavor to it. Here I have about 3½ cups of whole milk with 1/2 cup of cream to give it a really rich flavor to it. We're going to add it in little by little, just like you would if you were making a gravy, to kind of incorporate this liquid into it. And keep your temperature down pretty low. I'm going to bring it to right up to around a 4. And we're going to just whisk it together to get it nice and smooth. It's going to be really thick in the beginning, but by the time we get to all of our milk in here, we should have this nice kind of creamy base that is just going to be wonderful. And you could use just the plain bechamel as its own for the sauce, but I am going to add some cheese to it just to make it a little nicer. Here we go. And then we will add another kind of essential ingredient is we're going to add some pepper to this. White pepper would be the best, but white pepper isn't always easy to find. So you can use regular pepper. You're just going to see the little black specks more than you would with white pepper. And then for those of you who like a little bit of nutmeg, which is a kind of a traditional option, you could put a little bit of nutmeg in this sauce as well. Woo! I made a big mess as usual. But I'm not a big fan of the nutmeg in it, so I kind of leave it out. Give it a little clean. There we go. And then I'm going to let it thicken up a little bit. Then we'll add in some more of our liquid and kind of simmer it down. So I'm going to turn it up to about a 5. We're going to let it simmer for a little bit. While we let it simmer, I'm going to mince up our red peppers that we're going to be adding into our ricotta base for our manicotti. And again, you want to mince these up nice and small so that you don't get any, really big chunks. It's just nice subtle hints of the sweet pepper in there.
Do you have a question? What's the best way to keep the noodles from sticking together?
These, once they come out, they shouldn't stick together because we have them separated here. I find when we stuff them up and we put the sauce on them, they're not going to really stick together because we'll hold them and stuff them individually for it. But you could always like coat them with a little bit of olive oil if you want to get that non-stick, or a bit of butter. But I find that these, you're not going to be leaving them like clumping together so much that you're going to need to do that. Okay, now we've got it nice and a little bit thicker, so I'm going to add in a bit more of my milk and cream mixture. And you could always use all whole milk if you want, but I find that the combination of both, a little bit of that cream just gives you this lovely richness to it, makes it just a little bit nicer. Okay, we're going to add up our kind of minced up red peppers. And then we're going to add in some green onions for this. So I'll slide this to the side as well. I'm going to cut off the bottom ends of it, just the kind of very bottom part so they're not super strong. But then we'll use all the way up until the very tips where it starts to get a little bit more stringy.
Can you use any type of steak for this meal?
Yes, I just happen to have a nice top sirloin, which is not the nicest steak, but we're going to be cutting it up into kind of thin slices and searing it off with some seasoning. So it'll work really well because it's going to be kind of like with the pasta on a bit.
And do you make all your own recipes, or you look up someone?
Most of my recipes are, I've had a base recipe and then I tweak it to make it my own over the years. I've been cooking for a long time, so I have a lot of, let me slide this over here. I've learned a lot of things over the years. Now, if I ever get something new that I've never made before, then yes, I'll actually go up and I'll compare a bunch of recipes in there. But most of the things I typically are either creating on the spot just based from like my base knowledge. Like a bechamel is a pretty basic sauce that once you know how to make, it's really simple to modify. It's kind of the base for most like macaroni and cheeses in here. If you do like a flour-based one. But when I was younger, I used to read a lot of, there's a couple of these like cooking books, which were like, learn the fundamentals about how to make every sauce or whatnot. And then you can really do a lot with just spices and changing it up and just knowing how things are going to cook. Add in a little bit more. Here we go. And you can see it's starting to get a nice kind of velvety thickness to it. And now we'll give it a little rest for a second. Let's see. my whisk does not want to, there we go. We're going to add in some pesto into our ricotta because I find it can be, with all the cheese in there, if you don't have a good amount of spice, it can get a little blunt, like, you know, too much cheese, a little too much monotony in there. So I like to spice it up a little bit. So I'm going to add in about a heaping tablespoon of pesto. And we're going to mix that in there. Plus, I'm going to add in some Italian spices. We're going to do about a tablespoon. And then some garlic salt. And we're going to do about 1.5 teaspoons of garlic salt. And this should give us the nice kind of seasoned up base for our filling. I'm going to turn this down just a smidge. And we're going to add in the rest of our cream here. So we've got, or our milk and cream. So we've got all 3.5 cups of whole milk with 1/2 cup of cream in here. And I'm going to turn it down nice and low, down to a 2 now, because we don't want it to scald or anything like that.
Have you ever considered putting out a recipe book?
So that is kind of my goal for this next year, is to make a cookbook. And then for everyone, but I do send out recipe cards to our members every week. I think we just sent out 3 this morning about recipes we cooked last week. So I send those out to our members every week, but we also have all of our videos on the link on our page, so everybody could always go back and rewatch and recreate my recipes by rewatching them, because I do try to go through every single ingredient with it. So right here is, we've got my ricotta base with mozzarella, red peppers, green onions, some pesto sauce, and this is going to stuff up our manicotti. So we're going to have this lovely manicotti with this bechamel sauce, and we'll put it in there. I'm going to give this a good thing, and let me grab a little bit of garlic salt in here. You could use plain salt too, but I like the garlic flavor to it, but regular salt is traditional. And I'm going to add in about 1.5 teaspoons. So we're going to do a good shake over. And then I realized I forgot to set my pepper out. So let me grab my pepper, because that is a key ingredient in a bechamel. White pepper gives you that all white look, just like if you were to use a plain salt instead of a garlic salt. But I just have black pepper. And we're going to put in about, 1 teaspoon of black pepper. For a stronger pepper flavor, you can use freshly ground, but I like mine a bit more mild. And again, for those of you who like that little pinch of nutmeg, you can add up to 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg in here. We're going to let that simmer for just a little bit. And while we do that, I've got my base for our shells, or not our shells, but our manicotti right here. So I'm going to give it a quick taste. Perfect. Let me grab my pastry, or like a pastry bag here. If you don't have one of these, just use a Ziploc baggie, stuff it in there, cut off the end, and voila, you've got your own. I just buy these in bulk, and I have a whole bunch that I use for like frostings and whatnot when I'm baking.
You have a question, is that an Alfredo sauce?
This is a bechamel, which is very similar to an Alfredo sauce. But this kind of starts with a roux base of butter and flour, and then we add it in our milk, and then pepper and salt. I am going to be adding some cheese to it, so it's actually going to go from a bechamel to a Mornay sauce, which is simply just adding cheese, which is what like the macaroni and cheese is. Typically for Mornay, you use Parmesan or Gruyère, which is what we're actually going to be using. But cheddar cheese, and if you use cheddar cheese, that's what gives you mac and cheese.
And what's in the ricotta?
The ricotta here, we've got 1 tub of ricotta, about 2 cups of mozzarella cheese, 1/2 cup of freshly grated Parmesan cheese, some diced up red peppers, green onions, pesto, Italian herbs, and garlic salt. We're just going to kind of squeeze it down here. And then once you've kind of got a good base on the top, give it a good twist. and then just cut your end. And this is what you're going to pipe through. And make sure you cut your end big enough that you can fill it up, but not so big that it's going to burst out. But since you do have some chunks in there, I think I need to go even bigger. It can get, like you could get a clog in the line, I should say. And what we're going to do, and I'm just going to turn this down even lower since I don't have a chance to things, but we're going to fill these guys up. So just stick your little mouth in there and kind of squeeze it through. And you don't have to fill it up from one side. You can go to the other side and pipe it in there as well. And there you've got your stuffed manicotti. And I find for the box of manicotti shells, like a 9 by 13 inch tray works well. I'm actually using, this is a cast iron, kind of like a Dutch oven based thing, but in a baking dish style. And it just helps keep it nice when you take it out of the oven. Keeps the bechamel sauce and the ricotta nice and hot for a little bit longer on there. Here we go. Fill this guy. Didn't get him in there. No worries if it gets a little bit messy. You just kind of pop them back in there. Just make sure you have your mouth in the thing all the way. There we go. And I find that 1 tub of ricotta with your 2 cups of mozzarella gives you just enough to fill up all of these, with your little bits of veggies in there and whatnot. You don't want to make too much because then there's really nothing you can do with it.
You have a question. How do you make your steak tender?
So my trick is I use a little bit of Worcestershire sauce, which helps keep it nice and juicy. But you kind of want to do, if you're going to do it all in the pan at one time, you want to do a quick sear and then turn your temperature down low and kind of spoon it over with some butter. You don't want to go too high on it and then overcook it. I feel like it's going to stay tender as long as you don't overcook it. And that's just really like, with steak, you should always cook it a little bit under what you need it to be at, and then let it rest for that 5, minutes or so. And that kind of continues to cook it to that perfect, where I like mine at a nice medium rare. Okay, let's get these guys all pumped up. This guy's a little bit split, but that's okay. And just try to be, some of them, I will say, with your packaging, some of them get a little bit damaged as they go, but as long as they can close up around it, it's okay if they have a split. Your base should be pretty good to hold it together where it's not going to ooze out too much everywhere. I typically always have 1 or 2 that end up not making the cut. They either break completely apart for it, but it looks like today we might have all of them make it. And that's the big thing, is you can't overcook them, that first initial baking part or boiling part, because then they are more likely to split apart and break. Okay. Let's see if I can figure out how to get a few more in here. And we're going to be perfect amount for all of them.
All the kids eat this?
Yes, they do. This is one of their favorite dishes. They love manicotti because it's just so delicious. But yes, they do. Now, my husband's the only one who is not the biggest fan, but he's going to love the steak and the cheesy sourdough bread that garlic bread that we're gonna make. He's not a pasta lover. Okay, looks like we got all but 1 noodle, which is perfect. So we have them in here, and we'll be ready to pour our bechamel sauce over when it's done and then pop this in the oven. But I'm going to wash my hands up because they're nice and messy. And then let's give our bechamel sauce a nice, you can see how thick it is. And then let me grab a spoon to give it a taste before we add our cheeses in here. Maybe a hint more garlic salt. Now, when we add a bit of our cheeses, that's going to add a bit more of a saltiness to it. And then a little bit more black pepper. Just a hint more. And then where's my Parmesan cheese? I'm going to grate some Parmesan here. I'm not making it a super cheesy based sauce, but I do want a little bit in there because I think it will be lovely. So I'm going to grate in here maybe like a 1/3 cup of Parmesan. And again, this essentially turns it from a bechamel into a mornay. Here. Okay. And then I do have a little bit of Swiss and Gruyere cheese that we're going to pour in here. I'm going to just do a small handful, so probably another like almost 1/3 cup or so. I like the mixture of it instead of using all of just one. None of my bags want to open for me today. There we go. And again, just a kind of a small handful or so. You don't need too much. We're going to whisk it and let it melt up. And then we will drizzle this over the top of our manicotti. And we'll bake this up in the oven. There you go. You can see, but just adding even just a little bit of cheese, you can see how much of that cheese pulled creaminess that it gives you. So it just makes it more lush and decadent. Okay, we've got this. Beautiful. So I'm going to turn that off. We're done with my whisk over here. And then we're just going to kind of ladle it all the way over. You could probably pour it over too, but I know if I try to pour it over, I'll make a huge mess. Until we've got it kind of completely coated. Now, if you don't want to do a bechamel, you can always do like a jar of marinara over it to give you more of that traditional tomato-based manicotti. This is delicious. Beautiful. Okay. I don't think we actually need all of it, so I'll set this over here. I'll let it cool off for a second, but let's get this popped in the oven. This needs to bake for, like minimum of like 20 minutes. You can go up to 30. So my plan is this should all be baked up by the time we have everything else done. So I'm going to pop it in here at 375 to let it cook up because we need it to cook and melt up the delicious cheeses inside there to make it perfect and ooey and gooey deliciousness. Okay, let's get on. We've got our vegetables. We've got our garlic bread we need to make. So I'm going to slide this guy over here since we're done. And we're going to get working on our garlic bread because we want that to kind of crisp up in the oven. And I realized I need my cutting board and knife. I thought I might need it again. So for this garlic bread, what we're going to do is we are going to melt some butter into our pan and we're going to chop up some garlic and make this lovely seasoned garlic, base to it. And then once it's like all melted, we are going to cut open our bread and brush it all over it. And then we're going to grate some freshly grated Parmesan cheese on it. So we're going to use, we've got a good amount of bread. So I'm going to use maybe 5 tablespoons of butter here. And have those start melting up. And then I'm going to mince up some fresh garlic to bring in there to really give it a nice flavor for it. And we're going to use a good amount of garlic here. This is going to be like a tablespoon of fresh garlic minced, maybe a little bit more because these are really large cloves of garlic. And we're going to mince it up and then we'll infuse them in our butter. just to give them a little bit of extra flavor. And then we'll also add some garlic salt and some Italian herbs. And then, of course, freshly grated Parmesan cheese. But just chop up your garlic nice and small. In a pinch, you could definitely use garlic, but I think fresh garlic is going to give you a nicer flavor on this. So we'll get this nice and minced up here. Okay, that should be nice and good. And once you have your base of your butter melted, it doesn't matter if it's completely melted, as long as you have enough to completely cover the bottom of your pan, add your garlic in. You just don't want it to be on too much direct heat on there. Otherwise, you can scorch your garlic. And give my hands a quick rinse. And let me grab my little basting brush, is what we're going to kind of use this to kind of coat it up, but we'll give it a little stir with this. Beautiful. You can already smell how like wonderful it smells, just that fresh garlic. Okay, once that's kind of melted up and that butter, those flavors infused, then we'll go over there and start prepping up our garlic bread for that. But while we wait, let's get our steak here. This is a top sirloin. It's about a 2-pound top sirloin. I'm going to trim off the fat, and then we're going to slice it up into thin pieces, and then we're going to season it up so that we can kind of sear it off. Now, if I had actual like full on good sirloins, I would leave them whole and just keep them as a steak. But with a top sirloin, it's not as high of a quality of a meat. So I'm going to slice it up, and I think that will work well for it. I don't want super long pieces, so I'm going to kind of put it down here. And then I'm aiming for a kind of a good thickness, not too thin, because again, I want them to still be nice and tender and juicy inside. And we're going to do a fairly quick sear off on these so that they can be a nice kind of medium rare.
Marilyn Sanchiga.
Oh, thank you, Marilyn. We appreciate that. So we're just going to do these nice, big, kind of thicker cuts to it. That way, when we sear it off, you're going to leave it still that pinkish red in the inside, and then as it sits, it will be perfect for it. And these will cook up pretty fast. But that's what keeps them nice and tender. It's the same thing like when you do a steak bite. You don't want them too cook them too long, or you're going to get tough meat. I'm going to turn this down just a smidge. Now that we have our garlic kind of toasting up in here. Beautiful. And I just wanted enough to infuse into that butter so it will add, again, a lot of delicious flavor here. There seems to be a pretty good seam in this steak right here, so I'm going to make the cut right there, and we'll slice this up. Again, cut off any fat. We aren't grilling this at such a high heat that fat's going to get nice and crispy. So cut off any big chunks of it. You can always leave the small marbling and whatnot, but if there's a big strip of fat, cut it off. Here. And then let me turn this off. We're just going to let our butter kind of simmer there for that remainder. And then we'll do a pause on this as we get our garlic bread so it can hop in that oven and kind of heat up. We're going to be using a sourdough that I baked up the other day. We just never got around to eating it because we've had a pretty busy weekend here. And we were enjoying our chocolate cherry walnut sourdough bread. So I was like, oh, this is perfect to turn into a cheesy garlic bread.
And Judy sent you a feathered tiara.
Oh, pretty bougie over here in my tiara. See, I told my husband I was a princess, but never listened. Okay. Here is our delicious kind of garlic butter, and we are going to add in some garlic salt and some Italian herbs to give it a little thing. But we are going to, let me swirl it around here. And then we've got our sourdough bread here that we are going to cut up. We've got our nice, beautiful kind of feather pattern on it. And with this, you are not going to cut it all the way through. You're going to cut it down, but I want the bread to stay intact as a whole because we're going to kind of stuff it. This is like one of my favorite ways to kind of do a garlic bread, but you want to cut it down, leave your spices kind of thick, but you see how we're not all the way through. This is going to help keep it nice and moist and flavorful inside, but still infuse it with all that rich flavor. This is also great to do with like a French bread or a baguette. It works really well. There's this bread I used to make all the time. It was a form of garlic bread, but you added bacon. You wrapped it in bacon with Swiss cheese and you stuffed it with Swiss cheese. Oh, it's so good. I haven't made it in years, but I used to make it all the time in college. It was like the one that all of my roommates, everybody was like, can you make that cheesy bread? And I don't know why I haven't made it in years, but you see, fluff apart like this, but intact on the bottom. Now we're going to go in. We've got our kind of herby garlic butter here. And hopefully we're going to put in about a teaspoon and a half of garlic salt. You want a good kick in here because it's got to season up all of that bread. And you know what? Since it's nice and hot, I might add just a smidge more butter in here because I want to make sure I have enough to get all the way through. And this bread is pretty big, so that residual heat should melt it while it infuses. So just starting from one end, actually, before I do that, I'm going to put it on my baking sheet. That way any of those butter juices can soak into the bottom of the crust on it. Here we go. Line your baking sheet with a little bit of parchment paper so that you don't make a huge mess. And so just a little dabble in there. And we will go back over with more, but we're going to start off with this. And make sure when you do it, kind of pick up some of that garlic bits in there and shove those in there. We'll do kind of a course through one time, and then we'll go through over it again. But you want to make sure everybody gets this goodness on here. Here we go. And we're not going to wrap, you don't need to wrap this up in aluminum foil or anything like that. You're just going to have it on here and bake like this. Sourdough is a pretty hearty bread, so it can pretty much take a lot of that. There we go. Kind of scooping it up, that garlic chunks. Those are going to give you the most flavors. There we go. So I'm going to kind of break that up if I can. Should have put in some room temperature butter. Would have melted a little bit better. So back over again, over and over. And then we're going to do this all on the top of it as well. And just fill it up with all this deliciousness. And again, it's just right now we just have garlic, butter, and some garlic salt in here. Before we finish off with that, let me grab that mozzarella over here. We're going to do Parmesan too, but we're going to stuff mozzarella in the middles of it, in between them, and then we're going to put Parmesan on the top because Parmesan's a little bit more heat sturdy than mozzarella. So just stuff this bad boy up. This is great to do if you have like a loaf of bread that you haven't had a chance to eat up, or even half a loaf of bread. This makes great garlic cheesy bread. And this way it still looks nice and pretty and bougie. There we go. Stuff those guys up. I have enough for my last one. Perfect. Now take your Italian spices And you're just going to kind of do a light little sprinkle over the top, kind of fold it apart so that your mozzarella cheese gives almost a nice little Italian flavor to it. Here we go. And now we'll take our remaining garlic butter, coat this top crust with it. So good. Make sure you get any of those little cooked up garlic bits on here. We're just going to hide you down in here. You can go right in the middle. He's a winner right there. Best one. Can never have too much butter on garlic bread. Beautiful. Look at that. Let me give a little baste over it. And then we are going to grate some fresh Parmesan cheese over the top of it and sprinkle a little bit of garlic salt to give that a little thing. And then we are done. It's ready to pop into the oven. And I also say, put the parchment paper down so any cheese that happens to not fall on the bread will be stuck on the parchment paper and not your pan. Here we go. Beautiful. And a little bit of garlic salt to finish it off. And garlic salt, not garlic powder. And let's go pop this bad boy in the oven so he can bake up next to the bechamel or the manicotti and the kind of cheesy bechamel sauce. This, since the bread is already cooked, all you're really waiting for is the cheese to melt and it to kind of toast up. But we're going to slide this right in next to our manicotti there. And
why garlic salt instead of garlic powder?
Because garlic powder will be gritty and it doesn't have the saltiness that you need. And the garlic salt is better. I do not like garlic powder, but I love garlic salt. And I use garlic salt in place of garlic powder because I find that garlic powder is garlic that has been dehydrated and like pulverized and powdered up, while garlic salt is like garlic juice and salt that has been kind of dehydrated and flaked. So it tastes better. Okay, let's get our steak seasoned up and we'll start cooking up our mushrooms and our onions and our green beans. We're going to give it a nice drizzle of our Worcestershire. This is going to help keep our steak bites nice and juicy. We don't want a whole lot on there because we don't want them to be soaked in it, but we do want to have a good amount. And then we're going to sprinkle a little black pepper. Here we go. And then let me grab my garlic salt. And I realize I don't have my onion powder. So let me grab my onion powder because that's going to give it a nice savory crisp up on it. We're running low. Good thing I have a whole nother one in my pantry. Here we go. So we're going to sprinkle these around with our garlic salt. You're going to want about a teaspoon of garlic salt on here to kind of give it enough flavor through. And then the onion powder is going to give it a nice kind of crisp up sear crust on it, which works well because this is like a cheaper cut of meat. If I was using a nicer cut, I would probably skip the onion powder on it because you don't need it. But with the cheaper cut, it will help give it that really nice sear on it. We're going to kind of coat these up. Make those flavors come together. And then we're just going to let that sit for about a minute while we prep up our veggies for our side. We're going to do onions, mushrooms, and green beans. So we're going to give our onion a nice little slice up here, just a half of a yellow onion. I'm going to do it long and skinny because we've got green beans in there, so I feel like long and skinny works well with them. There it is. We're going to put in a little bit of olive oil over here. Just about a tablespoon should be all that we need. I'm going to turn my heat on to about a 6.5, so like a medium high. And let's get our onions sauteing up. We're just going to give them a minute to kind of get a little bit of a caramelization on it so that they get a nice flavor. Here we go. And then let's start slicing up our mushrooms, because I feel like the mushrooms will just work well with the bechamel and the steak. They just all come together. So we're gonna do a nice kind of thin slice on them. I'm not sure if I'll use all of these mushrooms, but we'll see. Okay. You can always use pre-sliced ones. I'm using baby bellas because I prefer baby bellas over like a white button mushrooms. But it all works well. Here we go. And let's.
Oh, you have a question? Do the kids like mushrooms?
Half of them like mushrooms. My boys, I'll say all of my boys like mushrooms, and then my girls do not, but they'll eat the green beans out of it. I do not like. I try to cook. I cook one meal, and the kids can eat and pick what they like out of it. I am not a short order cook, so I try to make something that everybody likes, or at least components of it that everybody likes, so that at least there's something to fill their bellies with. And we always have fresh fruit with dinner, so there's always kind of a fresh fruit with it. I'm going to put about a tablespoon and a half of oil in here, and then we're going to add some butter as well, because we're going to kind of sear off our steak in a butter oil mixture, which allows it to get you that nice butter flavor, but you can sear it off a little bit higher than you would have just straight butter, which gives you that nice kind of crisp crust on it. That oil kind of protects the butter, like the milk solids in butter, from burning. You can't do it as high as like an oil sear, but it gets you there. Let's see, let me get some tongs here so we can toss our onions. Here we go. And when we got our green beans prepping, so let me mince up a little bit of garlic to go in there with our, actually might put garlic in both the steak and the green beans, because fresh garlic just adds a nice little touch to it. So I'm just going to mince it up, and then we'll go over it a couple of times. I have my garlic bread and the manicotti and the bechamel sauce. They'll be cooking. I set the timer when we put the garlic bread in for about 15 minutes, because I figured that's all it's going to take at 375 to get that cheese melted inside and nice and crisped up for that cheesy, garlicky goodness. Which I will say, most of the time, I feel like cheese bread is always done on is always done on like a French or Italian bread, but a sourdough, it's really delicious as well. A lot of times, if I have just even leftover slices of sourdough, I'll lay them flat and spread some butter and make it. It's just nice and lovely.
Yeah, question. Do you like induction stoves?
I have used them a couple of times, and I like them on aspects of it. I will say, when our house, like when we had to remodel our kitchen and everything, I had an induction hot plate, and I got really used to cooking with it, and it cooked so fast that when we bought our new stove, and I was like, first day I was like, so I'm like, I think there's something wrong with our stove. It's taking forever for the water to boil. And I couldn't figure out why it was taking so long, because I had gotten so used to using my induction plate that I finally realized that it was the induction that was so much faster to boil the water. So I do like it on aspects of the fact that you can cook a lot of, it cooks faster and stuff like that. The thing that I don't like about it is you have to have specialty cookware. So I only had a few pans that actually worked with it, which made it a bit more challenging on there, so that I can't use all of my cookware that I have, and I have a lot of cookware. So that's, I feel like, the drawback is, unless you are new and you don't have established cookware, then yes, induction can be great. But if you already have a lot of pots and pans, and if they don't work with it, then that's a downfall. Okay, we've got my butter in here. Let's toss in our garlic. Let it get a kind of a sear up for just about a minute, 30 seconds to a minute. You don't want to cook your garlic too long on its own or it will burn, especially at higher heats, but you want it to caramelize up just a little bit. Just swirl it in that oil and butter mixture. And while these are cooking up, I'm going to drop our mushrooms in over here so that we can have them start to saute. There we go. And kind of coat them up in there. You may need to add in a little bit of oil or butter because mushrooms are kind of like sponges. They really do soak up all of that kind of deliciousness. But I'll do that after they've had a minute or so to get some of that heat on the pan. And then we'll add in our green beans, which will actually like get tender cooked up fairly quickly. Okay. Let's get our steak going here. The trick is with our steak is we don't want to overcrowd it when we cook it up. So if I have to do it in multiple batches, I will. And we're going to sear this off on each side. The first side takes the longest. The second side goes really fast. Don't overcook or you'll get chewy bits of steak.
About how high of a heat do you cook these on?
I'm cooking these right now on about a 6.5 because I am using that butter and oil mixture. If you do all oil, you can cook it a little bit higher. And again, if you do all butter, you have to cook it a little bit lower.
And can you go over the seasoning on the steak?
Yes. So we use a little bit of Worcestershire, garlic salt, black pepper, and onion powder. So really, really simple, but will be like just kind of delicious. Really lets the meat shine on here instead of going too crazy with the spices. Put some of these smaller bits in. And again, don't just dump all of your meat in the pan at one time. You do want it to sear off and get a good cook on it. If you dump it all in at one time, what happens is your oil and your butter and your pan temperature goes down, which means your meat doesn't get a good sear on it. And then it just leaks out all of its juices instead of keeping them in.
Mary, since you get.
Oh, well, thank you, Mary. We appreciate that a lot. Okay. Let's see. Our green beans are about ready to go in here in just a second, but I've got some of my meat is ready to flip over. I know it's ready to flip is when you start to see these brown edges coming up along the side. That's when we're going to know that it's nice and ready to flip. And look, we've got this gorgeous sear on it. Beautiful. Perfect. There we go. I'll slide these guys over. Perfect. And again, this second side is going to cook up fairly fast compared to the first side. It goes a lot faster. And you want to stop it a little bit before your desired doneness. So I like mine as a nice medium rare. You just stop it a little bit before that because as it sits on the plate, it's going to continue to cook. So you don't want to cook it till it's perfection because by the time it sits and does its rest, it's going to cook a little bit more. There we go. So we've got our mushrooms in here and sauteing up. We're going to add our green beans in. It looks like we've got about 3 or so more minutes on our garlic bread and our manicotti, and then it should be nice and done and ready. I'm going to get that out. Let's get our green beans in our pan sauteing up with our mushrooms. Add a nice little thing. I've got one more little handful. And we're going to put a little pat of butter in there just to give them a little bit of love. We'll season up the mushrooms and the onions and stuff at the very end.
Do you need to refrigerate the garlic you use?
Yes, the fresh garlic, you do need to refrigerate it. It doesn't have any like preservatives or anything to keep it fresh. So it doesn't last as long as garlic, but it lasts a good, like, I want to say a month or so before it's gets slimy or whatnot. Okay, we've got our little steak bites. We're going to take these first ones out. They should still be nice and, pinkish red in the middle of it. Again, they cook up fairly fast, but they will continue to cook on our plate. And then we're going to sear off our last bits as well. There we go. Get these guys in here. And then at the end, I kind of love to like pop them all back in this little garlic butter over here because it has such great flavor. And again, don't overcrowd your meat. Make sure they have, their own space on your pan because that's going to give you the nice searing that they need. There. I'm going to rotate. I have found that I feel like everybody's like stoves and ovens have a little quirks. I find that my stoves cook hotter over here than they do on the bottom quadrant. So as long as I turn my pan midway through cooking, then they cook evenly. Okay, I've got 3 little bits and I think I can get them all on here where they're all still got some good room. Okay, once I start to see that brown edges popping through, then I'll know that I'm ready to flip them. Okay, let's give our green beans a little stir here. The green beans, as I'm frying the mushrooms, I'm going to cook them to a nice kind of tender crisp. We'll know that they're right at that is when they get this nice kind of bright, vibrant green color. That's when we'll know they're ready. I'm going to put the lid on them and let them steam cook on here. Right now we've got a little bit of an opaque greenness to it. Little mushroom always jumping out at me. So put it on. Nice thing about HexFlat is they have a little hole that allows the steam to escape out. We're going to flip these and then we're going to go get our manicotti and our bechamel sauce out and our garlic bread because it is beeping. And the cameraman says that the meat is cooked perfectly, even though he's supposed to wait until dinner to eat. I'm going to take those off of your plate when you get there. That's what I used to always say. My stepdad growing up, he would always steal like the meat as I was cooking it. And I always would say, I'm like, well, then you're getting less on your plate. Something about men, they can never wait for dinner. They're always in the kitchen snacking right before it's made. Okay, we got this flipped. And now let's go get our manicotti and our garlic bread out of the oven. Let's slide this over on here. And let's go grab those. Here we go. Put this over here so we're ready for it. So we've had our manicotti has been in the oven for about 25 minutes or so, which is just enough time to make it beautiful and golden and delicious. So we'll slide this guy out first. You can see we've got this nice bubbling up around. It's simmering just gorgeously. So I'm going to pop it right here. You can smell that pepper and that bechamel. It smells wonderful. And then here is our beautiful garlic cheese bread. That Parmesan has got that golden brown, beautiful toasting on it. So it is nice and ready. And it looks like our steak here is just about ready as well. Perfect. I'm going to turn off the heat now. Kind of coat it up in this nice little juicy deliciousness. And then we're going to add them over to our plate. And then I'm going to drizzle some of this buttery meat sauce over it. And again, don't overcook your sauteed like slices of meat or they won't be as tender and juicy.
New question. Are there any kids that won't like every part of this meal?
Yes, there is. I only probably have one kid who will like every part of this meal. And that's Torin, because he is my best eater. It's probably why he's over 6 feet at 13 years old. But everyone will love the manicotti and the steak and the garlic cheese bread. Torin and the little boys will like the green beans and the things there because they like their veggies. I'm always telling the girls you need to eat some more veggies. If it was a salad, they would eat it, but they're not as interested. We're going to season these with a little bit of garlic salt. There we go. And onion powder. That onion powder is going to really stick onto them, and then some black pepper. We want about a teaspoon of onion powder, like 3/4 of a teaspoon of garlic salt. And where did my black pepper? It is hiding. There it is. It's right in front of my face. And about a 1/2 teaspoon of black pepper. That black pepper really gives it a nice pop. Coat these up. That onion powder really makes that residual moisture in the pan and allows all the spices and the seasonings to stick to the green beans and the mushrooms instead of like being like a juice on the bottom of your pan. So they just make all that flavor stick and season up. Okay, this is done. We are about ready to serve up here. So let me figure out, let me get this guy out of the way. And we'll get ready to serve up here. We've got our garlic bread. Pretty fantastic. This can go right here. You can see that ooey gooey cheesiness melted inside with all that flavor on our sourdough bread. It's just going to be amazing. I'm going to bring my bechamel or my manicotti. Apparently, I just love saying the word bechamel. I think I've said it like 1,000 times tonight. So it's the word of the day, guys. I'll pop it right here. And beautiful. Let's serve up our dinner. Let me grab a plate and get this guy served up. Let's see. Got my shovel. This is really great for taking the manicotti out. Okay. For dinner tonight, we'll start with our manicotti that we stuffed with ricotta, mozzarella cheese, pesto, diced up red peppers, and seasoned with some Italian spices and herbs. And then it's in a lovely bechamel sauce where we added a little bit of Parmesan, Gruyère, and Swiss cheese. We've got our sautéed green beans, mushrooms, and onions for a lovely little, green veggie on the side. And then we're going to add our steak strips that we seared up. It's top sirloin that we seasoned with a little bit of Worcestershire, garlic salt, black pepper, and onion powder. And then we will serve it with a glorious slice of our garlic cheese bread. Look at that. All of that gooey, juicy, cheesy deliciousness in there on our homemade sourdough bread. Well, guys, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page, so if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to our page and search for what we made. We've got our manicotti and a bechamel sauce with our steak bites, and you can watch and cook along with us again. We also have a link to our Amazon storefront that has all of our different cooking gear and gadgets in it. I've got my Hexclad, my Dutch ovens, my baking sheets, knives, cutting boards, all the different things I use in the kitchen I have in there for you guys to check out. But again, thank you so much for joining us here today. Don't forget to like and subscribe.